Sorry. Yes.
Well, good evening. I call the regular meeting of the Ames City Council for Tuesday, August 23rd to order. Welcome, Council, and those in the attendance. And we're going to start off with several proclamations before we get into consent and other items on the agenda. First one will be Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. I invite Julie Saxton and Chief Huff to join me up here. Whereas Suicide Prevention Awareness Month is intended to help raise awareness of the issue of suicide, mental health needs, and available resources in our community. And whereas on average, one person dies by suicide every 18 hours in Iowa. And whereas suicide increased 29% from 13.2 to 17.0 deaths per 100,000 population between 2014 and 2019. And whereas in 2018, suicide was the second leading cause of death for Iowans ages 10 through 34, fourth leading cause of death for Iowans ages 35 to 54, and eighth leading cause of death for Iowans ages 55 to 64. And whereas suicidal thoughts, much like mental health conditions, can affect anyone regardless of age, gender, or background, and is often the result of an untreated mental health condition, suicide thoughts, although common, should not be considered normal and often indicate more serious illness issues. And whereas we reaffirm our commitment to building our understanding of mental health and substance use disorders, increasing access to education, training, and treatment for our community members, and spreading hope and vital information to people affected by suicide. And whereas the focus of Suicide Prevention Awareness Month this September is to encourage people to take time to support the well-being of family, friends, and neighbors, and support and spread the message that good mental health is essential to the overall health of each of us, that prevention works, and that treatment is effective. Therefore, I, John A. Hala, Mayor of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby proclaim September 2022 as Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, and I call upon the citizens of our community to help raise awareness of the importance of good mental health to the overall health of our community. I invite Julie and or Chief to share a few things before I present the proclamation to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, City Council. Thank you so much, Mayor, for recognizing September as Suicide Awareness Month. It's so important that we really bring to light education, awareness, and advocacy for suicide. Unfortunately, 15 of our Story County youth have died by suicide in the last calendar year. So again, we thank you so much for bringing to light a topic that we need to really talk about, again, to advocate, to educate our community on. Also, September 20th is our Mental Health Expo up at the Memorial Union. Lindsay Fenley is going to be our keynote speaker talking about her mental health journey towards recovery. There will be many organizations and providers here in our community to talk about what they can do to help those struggling with mental health or substance abuse. So again, thank you so much.
I just wanted to quickly add that August 31st is also National Overdose Awareness Day. And so we wanted to also recognize that as that is also a problem in all of our communities. So thank you, Mayor and Council, for recognizing Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Julie.
Mayor,
Oh,
okay.
okay.
Great. Actually, if you could all step just to the left a little bit behind me. I mean, to your right, you just step this way a little bit. Oh, awesome. Thank you.
We're very obedient to people.
That's
I like
right.
this. Okay. Now walk this way. 1, 2, I'll take 3 of them. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
right, second is Attendance Awareness Month, and it's my honor to invite Dr. Julius Lawson, our new school superintendent, to join me, as well as Andy Fish. Andy, are you? Yep, good. I'll read the proclamation, and I'll let Andy say a few things, and I'm also going to let Dr. Lawson introduce himself. And it's the first time in council chambers. Welcome, and we're thrilled that you're here. So, whereas chronic absence, missing 10% or more of school, alert school, community partners, and families that one or more positive conditions for learning are not in place, and whereas nationally, more than 16 million students miss 10% of the school year in excused and unexcused absences every year, double the rate from before COVID-19 pandemic, and whereas by sixth grade, chronic absence, missing 18 or more days of school, is a leading indicator of dropping out of high school, even more than academic performance, and whereas chronic absence adversely affects learning for all students because it slows the pace of instruction when teachers must spend time reviewing materials for students who were absent, and whereas showing up for school is an opportunity for students to build routines that can create a sense of safety and belonging, increase engagement, and develop trusting relationships with peers, teachers, and school staff that increase engagement and motivate them to participate in learning. And whereas research found, even before the pandemic, that families face significant barriers in getting their children to school or lacked the knowledge that showing up nearly every day to school was crucial to academic achievement. Therefore, I, John A. Haley, Mayor of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby stand with the nation in recognizing September 2022 as Attendance Awareness Month. We hereby commit to focusing on reducing absenteeism and addressing the factors that cause students to miss school in order to ensure all children have equitable opportunity to learn, grow, and thrive academically, emotionally, and socially. We recognize we must work together to engage students and families and send the message that learning can and must continue, whether students participate in person, remotely, or through blended approaches. Andy, I'll let you introduce yourself, make a few comments, and then Dr. Lawson.
Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Andy Fish with the United Way of Story County. I'm the Education Initiatives Coordinator there. I took up this role in March. Before that, I was a public school teacher for 6 years. Sporadic for some and abysmal for others is the way that a Story County teacher described to me this week of how attendance was last school year. Sporadic for some, abysmal for others. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, the percentage or the number of students who are chronically missing school, missing 10% or more of the school year, has doubled. In 2016, Ames's chronic absenteeism rate was 14%. We don't have the most recent numbers, but we likely follow something along the lines of the national trends. This is a big deal. By the end of elementary school, students who are chronically absent are often 3 grades behind students who get to school regularly. By 6th grade, your attendance is a better predictor of whether or not you're going to drop out than almost anything else. And that's not just a tragedy for the individual, that's alarming for our communities. The average high school dropout costs society $260,000, right? And we know, as we hear so much about how our small towns are dying or losing population or whatever you want to say of it, we know there's something we could be doing. Data analysis from Iowa State University showed that the number one reason people move back to their small towns is a positive experience in their public schools. It's the number one indicator of whether or not someone will move back home after they've left. Getting kids in school, having them be set up for success, giving them a positive experience is essential to the health of our communities. And it's not just on the schools. So thank you so much, Mayor, City Council, for acknowledging this day. Thank you to the businesses I've been reaching out to who are talking to their employees about the importance of attendance. And thank you so much, Dr. Lawson, for coming here and addressing the city. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Mayor. I wasn't prepared for a big speech. If so, I would have taking my retainer out. So I apologize if I sound like Cindy Brady. So I want to first say thank you to Andy for reaching out to me and discussing his passion as it relates to attendance. Attendance has the ability to really change the trajectory of outcomes for students. It was probably one of the first times I had heard someone focus on attendance with such passion and go as far to develop an attendance toolkit to share with our administrators and teachers. So thank you to Andy. So for me, as a new school superintendent here, there is so much to be excited about. Awesome community, wonderful new high school opening tomorrow. And this transportation idea is looming. So I'm really excited. I haven't slept in a few days because I want to make sure that we have students picked up on time and in schools, because attendance is as critical as it is. And we all know that a really happy and healthy start to the school year means great things toward the end. So again, thank you. I look forward to coming back to visit with you again soon, Mayor and Council. Thank you.
One, two, three. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you so much.
All right, and I would invite Heather Johnson to join me up here for the Ames Art Month proclamation. And your entourage, apparently. Great. I'll let you introduce them after I'm done reading. How's that sound? I'll come over here. There's room over here. Always a shy one in the crowd. All right. Whereas the arts, including visual arts, dance, theater, public arts, music, and more, are essential elements of a vibrant and engaged community in Ames. And whereas the arts significantly impact the economic vitality of the state of Iowa by contributing $4.5 billion and 43,000 jobs to the state's economy, and whereas rich experiences with the arts help children develop crucial skills such as critical thinking, problem solving, social skills, fine motor skills, self-expression, imagination, creativity, and communication skills that are integral to success in and out of the classroom. And whereas the arts can promote healing and enhance well-being by bolstering coping, self-esteem, self-expression, and quality of life, and by reducing stress, depression, and situational anxiety. And whereas the arts can help residents feel more satisfied and rooted in their neighborhoods, can foster unity by inspiring community pride, help people engage in difficult conversations, and facilitate understanding different points of view. Therefore, I, John A. Haley, Mayor of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby proclaim the month of September as Ames Art Month. I encourage all citizens to support the arts in Ames. I'll let Heather, our wonderful director for Octagon, introduce herself and others.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. I just want to say, too, that Ames is very fortunate to have over 36 arts and culture organizations in Ames to help offer great experiences and also to bring together a collective engagement and enrich our quality of life. So I want to thank everybody here, a few of the organizations, and I'm going to quickly just name off the few that could not be here tonight, but also are in support of this. We have the Ames Children's Choir, Ames Choral Society, Ames Community Arts Council, the Ames Convention Visitors Bureau, the Ames History Center, Ames Main Street, Ames Municipal Band, Ames Public Art Council, Ames Town and Gown Chamber Music Association, the Ames Writers Collective, Bob's Retirement Hunt, the Creative Artist Studio of Ames, Iowa State University Department of Music and Theater, KHOY 89.1 Community Radio, Melissa Stenstrom Fine Jewelry, Octagon Center for the Arts, Ryman Gardens, the Royal Scottish Country Dance Society of Central Iowa, Stevens Auditorium, Story Theater Company, University Museums of Iowa State University, Wild Rose English Country Dance, and the Workspaces Memorial Union. And I just want to thank, again, the council and the mayor also for supporting funding for the arts in Ames. It makes a huge difference, especially when we're ranked one of the lowest in the nation. And Americans for the Arts Studies said for every dollar that's invested in a community arts organization is a return for the community of $7, which benefits the community overall. So thank you so much, and we appreciate it. So thank you.
Is there anything happening in September?
Oh, there might be this little event called the Octagon Art Festival on September 25th, downtown Ames. We're going to have a lot of our partners involved with that, whether doing live entertainment or having a booth on display. 10 to 4, it's free, open to the public. There's going to be great food, live entertainment, and of course, a little bit of art.
Very good. Thank you.
Should we just go over here?
Yeah, this figure. Oh, I'm so sorry. How do you think I got this job? But you know, I used to have her job. I used to be in the Octagon.
Who is that?
One, I'm gonna take 5. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, okay.
All right, going to move on to consent, and council, we are working from an amended agenda, and 2 things. One is under item number 12, that item should reads the Bridge Home and YSS for funding under the State of Iowa Continuum of Care grant funding, and staff has asked to pull item 14. We've not yet received the signed contract back from the contractor. So with that, does council wish to pull any item tonight? Hearing none, entertain a motion approving the amended agenda, less item number 14, consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to public forum. This is time we set aside for comments from the public on topics of city business other than those listed on the agenda. And we ask people to limit their comments to 3 minutes or less. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to address council tonight under public forum? Seeing none, we'll close public forum and move on to item number 28, motion directing staff regarding location of the Fitch Family Aquatic Center. Steve?
What I've tried to do for you today, I know this is a very difficult decision for you. I tried to compile what I think I heard with the major, both pros and cons about 2 sites. I think your discussion is focused on 2 sites, the O'Neill site and the Department of Transportation site. And I want to emphasize the public, I know the council has not made any decision. We started out looking at the DOT site and we found a number of issues, and you suggested we look at other sites that might be viable. And that's all you've done to this point is raise that issue, tried to explore that other alternative, which ended up being the O'Neill Park site. But certainly you haven't made any final decision. So I've tried to lay out the pros and cons. I didn't try to have an all-exclusive list. I'm sure there were some other issues I might have missed, but I think those are the most important ones that I've heard identified, both pro and con. Also, I want to emphasize I in no way tried to prioritize these. So I know they probably don't have equal weight to you, so you'll have to make that your own decision. So you can't just count them, each one of them, and try to add them up and see which has more than the other, because one might be weighted higher. But I hope it's a tool that's beneficial to you. And I know you've taken a lot of public input. We've had 2 meetings where we allowed people to speak to you personally, plus the opportunity to transmit to you a number of emails, which I know you've received about this issue. So I think I'll leave it up to you all if it's possible to make a decision. Any decision you make is not the final decision, you're just pointing us in a path to proceed. There's, which either site we work on, we're going to have extra steps to accomplish before we finalize any type of site arrangement. So if you have any questions about the pros or cons, I didn't try to make a very long explanation. So I hope I capture the essence of those issues in the brief language that I offered on each one.
Thank you. Any questions for Steve? As Steve mentioned, there will not be any public input. We have received many emails. There's been individual conversations. And so this is the opportunity for council to discuss amongst itself the pros and cons of each site. And council, I would think that be appropriate for everyone, each council member, to share your thoughts on what you see as pros and cons of the site before we entertain a motion. So I'll open the floor up to someone who wants to start. Or I'll call on somebody. Gloria, you want to
I
start?
have not been here physically present for a while because I've been out with COVID. And so I haven't said very much at those previous meetings because it's been difficult to contribute at a distance. My main concerns, as the comments have rolled in through email, and as we've heard them here, and as I watched the video of the meeting with the representatives from the DNR and our consulting firm, have been, first of all, I think the issue of sustainability and how this project fits with our goal to be a sustainable community. And while it's laudable for us to try to have a geothermal heat system for the facility, we have learned that's not possible, probably, at least not easily on the DOT site. But I balance that against the fact that paving over an entire city park is also losing green space that we will never get back. And so construction on a brownfield site like the DOT, to me, rises higher in our sustainability and efforts to improve the community and to revitalize it. I think O'Neill Park is a vital site already, and it doesn't feel like someplace that needs to be redeveloped. That gets to my second concern, which is strong neighborhoods. I think strong neighborhoods need places like O'Neill Park because it brings people together. It allows those people who have the least to have a space where they can enjoy the outdoors and recreation and family and friends at no cost. And so I think the free space is important, especially when you have a park that's surrounded by quite a few apartment complexes where people do not have their own yards. And so those concerns have topped my list. I also heard in that meeting with the DNR and our consultant that it would be, quote, easy to carry out the actions that might be needed for remediation at the IDOT. So I have fewer concerns now than I did going into this process. And I do think that I feel a little bit more confident about us owning that property and taking over those remediation efforts than private industry taking them over. Because I think, for me at least, the city is a known quantity, and we don't know who might purchase that site in the future. I also think that this question of O'Neill versus the IDOT site gets into whether we are letting the reinvestment district somehow shape our plans. And obviously, the O'Neill Park site is being considered because we might be able to redesign the reinvestment district to fit that park into that district. But the word there is might. So we don't know if that's possible. We don't know if there's remediation that needs to occur under the O'Neill Park site. There are a lot of unknowns. We may have to go to possibly a reverse referendum if we have to take a vote because we've reconfigured our options. It sounds like choosing O'Neill Park would make the project take longer, and that may knock one of the biggest positives off the table, which is building on O'Neill Park might allow a running track inside the facility. If the project takes longer, it's going to cost more. That's just a given in today's climate. So we may not even have that pro as something that we can hang on to for the project. So all of this put together to me says I am more confident now that we should be building on the IDOT site than on O'Neill Park. And that's where I am at this point, and I'll wait for my council colleagues to convince me of something other than that.
Thank you. Tim?
Mayor, would it be possible if we could have a question for Keith?
Sure.
Keith, could we ask you to come up and just, what I'd like to, because it's so important that we be on the same page with respect to the level of contamination. We are in receipt of an email from the DNR, Deb Williams, where she goes into the discussion of the contamination. Could you summarize for the community your understanding of the contamination? And then secondly, what steps we would know today about what remediation would look like?
So really with the email from Deb Williams, her and her colleague Eric Day, they both work with the
Excuse me,
private
Keith, just to
well
make sure,
program.
So the public knows, this email actually is in the council packet. So this is not something which is not public record. So if someone's interested in finding that, it is available. And so what you're talking about is not something which was just kept
Correct.
between council and staff. So I just want to make sure people understand this isn't a new information. It's actually been part and parcel of the packet that was posted on Friday at
Yep, very good. Yeah. So the conversation with them was really regarding geothermal. Can we do the geothermal wells? So the summary of what they gave us was they confirmed through what they have is that the contamination is on the northeast site or northeast corner of the site. They are concerned with the geological makeup of the ground. So, and they're concerned with I'm drawing a blank on the word, with the water underneath.
Aquifer?
The aquifer. Yep, thank you. So with the aquifer. So that is a concern, and there's nothing there. They're looking for confining layers. Now, they did look at some of the other material that they had on some of the surrounding wells to the southwest, to the south, and to the east. And when they looked at the makeup of the layers there, they're concerned that there's a confining layer to keep contamination from going vertical. So with this, if we're going to have to do wells, could be 150 feet deep, which is about where the aquifer is, or we'd have to go horizontal, which would be about 300 feet long, and those would have to be at 15, 30, and 45 feet. Don't know if there's enough distance to be able to do that. So they also talked about what we heard with these double casing wells, which a different section of the DNR had told us that those are done to prevent contamination from moving vertical. That's why I thought we may have to do those. What they said was that the double casings are really used to prevent the grout, because they have to put grout around the geothermal in these tubes. And what it does is if there are voids or if there's running water, sand, gravel, whatever, that grout, what it does, it gets to a point and it just keeps running out and it keeps running out. And then it's not as effective as what it needs to be. So you use that double casing in those areas to keep that grout from running into those voids or into the other areas. So those were some of the issues that they brought up. And I guess their summary of it was that based on the information that they have right now, they see the potential of approving geothermal at this site would be low, which is what their words were. Now, they said before they can make a final decision, there would need to be some more borings, different than what we have done so far, 50 feet deep. Look at the different layers to see if there's a confining layer, all those types of things. So that would be something that they would need before they would be able to make a final decision.
So this is very helpful. Could you remind us where the contamination is and the concern about how it would move towards the site?
Yeah. So the contamination again is stable. That's kind of static in the northeast corner of the site. Now, in the report from Deb Williams, they kind of confirmed that things are moving from the northeast to the southwest. So right now it's static. It's not moving. The concern that we've heard from other people as well as these folks is that once we start in construction and the groundwater moves, that's when the contamination has the potential for moving, which again could move from northeast to southwest. How quickly it moves, nobody has given us that answer. It's just the potential for that for dewatering, which is what we've talked about before in the construction site, could be contaminated, and we'll either have to, if they're below statewide standards, send that water to WPC, or if it's above statewide standards, we would have to have another company come in and treat it. And again, one of the other options was the pump and treat. But I know when I talked with Deb and Eric, they had some concerns about that as well. That said the information that you got is just one example. Your cost could be higher, your cost could be less once you figure out how much you really have to pump and treat in that northeast corner.
And could you remind us what toxins, you happen to know off the top of your head, what toxins are of concern?
Yeah. The big thing that they that in the sampling that we did, probably the two biggest ones were the benzene and naphthalene, which are components of gasoline. Those were the ones that were at the highest levels. Benzene was at the highest level and well above statewide standards. So those were the two main ones. There were some others, but not as high, and some of them weren't above statewide standards.
And then in terms of remediation, and again, it's a little bit difficult, and you did a good job of explaining, but what's involved in remediating the site to prepare it for construction?
Yeah. So again, the DNR, and we've heard this from multiple people, is that you don't have to chase the contamination. All right. So if you're not digging, or we're not digging in the northeast corner, we don't have to dig it just because it's contaminated, unless city council said we want to get rid of it. If that's a decision the city council made, then we would have to dig that all out and go through that process. But if we don't disrupt it or we minimally disrupt it, we could put parking lot over it, and it would be contained. And DNR, that meets their requirements. Okay, so that's one of the things. Now, if we do start getting the contamination, again, benzene does eat through or softens PVC piping. So what is a concern from every DNR person we talked to is that benzene vapor, if it has pathways to get through the soil, whether it's next to a pipe, it's next to a void, whatever it might be, it'll find those areas. So you just need to make sure that everything's sealed well. Again, one of the things that we talked about is vapor mitigation. So making sure that we have a good vapor and moisture barrier on the building. Anywhere where pipes coming in, make sure that's all sealed. And having testing if we have sumps in the building. Probably testing quarterly. That's what John Dunn, director of WPC, had suggested to see if there's anything in that water. Again, if it's below statewide standards, it can go to the WPC. If it's above statewide standards, then we would have to have another company, treat that water. Not sure what to tell you about the geothermal besides the information that I shared earlier. From this latest conversation with the DNR. I think more testing would need to be done to see if we could do geothermal. In the pump and treat, with that one, I think it was somewhere between $75,000 and $96,000. And again, what that is going in and trying to pump the groundwater out of the contaminated area and treat that before it even has a chance to migrate to the area where construction would be happening.
And so the range of costs for remediation during the construction phase, what have the consultants told us to be the range?
So there's a number of different things. I think, doing away with the PVC piping, going with either copper or ductile iron, I think was roughly $84,000. A vapor barrier, that whole vapor mitigation could be in the neighborhood of 100,000. There was the footings, because of the groundwater, and that's not mitigation, regarding contamination, but that was 125,000. The biggest cost was the double casings. That was 367,000. So if we don't have to do that, or we don't do geothermal, you not only save that mitigation cost if geothermal is not possible. It's just geothermal, if I remember correctly, it's about 20% higher than a regular HVAC system. So if we did have to go with a regular HVAC, we'd be a little bit less cost than what we were doing with the geothermal. So don't know exactly yet with that one. And then if we have to treat the water, if we have to take it out of the construction zone during the dewatering, that one, if you had to do it for a year at the levels that we use, that could be roughly, I think it was about $400,000. Again, if we pump and treat, it's about a quarter of that, or even less than that, a fifth of that. So I think, that's kind of the range. And again, these are all worst case scenarios. We could go in there and find out that, hey, it's not as bad and it's not migrating and we don't have some of those costs. On the other hand, we didn't make Swiss cheese out of the site with a lot of borings. Something could show up in an area that hasn't shown up because we didn't test that area.
So this is very helpful. And then we're going to be testing then going forward prospectively for the indefinite future, right? To make sure that the water and there's no vapor, right?
Yes. Yeah. We would, with the testing in the building and the sumps. One other thing that we have not really, I think we did have a cost associated with it, but I don't remember what it was, is if we did some sampling, some test wells between where the contamination is right now and the construction site, and you could test that periodically. And it's kind of the canary in the mine. All of a sudden you see you're testing it. Oh, contamination's going up. We can probably expect that it's going to migrate to the construction area. So that's something that, and I know we had a cost, but I just don't remember it off the top of my head.
And I'm almost done. 5 years from now, 5 years after construction, the samples show a high level of benzene or one of the other toxins. The consultants give us an indication, once the building is constructed, are there reasonable steps we could take to protect the building once higher levels of toxins are discovered?
We have not had that conversation. So I don't think I can answer that question in regards to, you're saying if all of a sudden vapor gets into the building, benzene vapor, is that what you're saying?
Sure. I mean, we're testing for a reason, and if the tests come back with a sufficiently high level of toxins, what do we do then?
If it's in the groundwater that's coming in, we would have to treat that groundwater, and if there's no vapor in the rest of the building, the area, and actually with the vapor, the benzene vapor, part of the mitigation system is that if the vapor does get to the building underneath this vapor barrier, it can be sucked out and then exhausted through the roof of the building to try to prevent it from getting inside the building. But if we had contamination inside the building, we have not had extensive conversation as far as what the techniques would need to be done and what that cost is. We have not had that conversation.
Okay. That's all the questions I had for Keith.
Well, just a point of clarification too, is that I think the consultant made it very clear that there are vapor retarders that can be put around below grade structures
Yes.
that are demonstrated and proven to resist penetration by the contamination of the benzene and the naphthalene.
Yeah.
We talked about the fact that you do like a radon system, your tile system around there would basically to capture the vapor before it gets in. There will not be any basement in this building. It's just going to be a tank below ground, maybe some pipe tunnels, but those can be ventilated and evacuated.
Correct.
And also, right now, it's a static plume. Once construction is complete, it is anticipated that it could go back to a static state as well, too, because the point is your disturbance is going on. And that was talked about when you had the DNR consultant and the
Impact 7G.
the DNR representative and consultant there too. So I think that I understand the line of questions and I appreciate that. I think it's important to have that due diligence, but I do think that to presume that it's going to get into the building, there's steps that are going to be trying to be taken to mitigate that significantly, in fact. So
Right. And as it travels, I think the consultant said too, as it travels, it will lessen, a little bit in levels. If it's 650 here, it's not going to move 650 all the way through. It will lessen, and over time, it will continue to lessen.
So,
anything else for Keith? or-
no,
Thanks, Keith.
thanks, Keith.
Thank you.
So for my comments, I want to begin by thanking Keith and Brian in particular. The amount of work that they have put into this analysis has been really tremendous. And so we appreciate that. This is a very difficult decision. And what we've heard tonight with respect to the level of contamination should alarm this community. It alarms me. And the idea that we would possibly consider locating anywhere where children are going to be present and our residents is appalling. We would never cite a school on a location with contaminated soil. And yet we're moving forward with the proposal tonight to locate a pool where, I won't restate all of Keith's comments. These are very concerning. And so we asked staff to look at an alternative site because we were concerned about the health risks. if we weren't concerned about the health risks, there would have been no reason to even look, but we did. We were concerned. So we looked, and they brought us back to the O'Neill site. The O'Neill site is almost exactly the same size as the DOC site. It has far better access by trails. And we have to remember that the people who are going to be accessing this facility oftentimes will be children for whom safe bike trails is a very important aspect, and that does not exist on the DOT site. The financial savings of going with the O'Neill site are considerable. We're foregoing the $2.9 million the DOT is asking, plus the unknown amounts of remediation. And there are only residences on two sides of the O'Neill Park site. And again, what I think is important to underscore is that we would be relocating the O'Neill site to another location that I think would provide a very nice alternative. But we have heard from some very clear vocal opposition from those who love their park. And I want to be very clear. I don't doubt the sincerity of those who claim to love their park. In fact, I'm glad that they love their park. But what we have to do is we're tasked with balancing between two very difficult sites. So the DOT site presents unknown risks of harm to our residents. And in addition, it presents a stigma. So families who have means, they have choices. The family I grew up in didn't have choices. We wouldn't have had the money to go to a country club or a facility in Ankeny, but children who grew up in a family like I did, or children who come from minority families may not have the resources to afford those same choices that our wealthier families do. And I am worried about the stigma that's attached to this. The O'Neill site, by contrast, offers a safe site, plus the very strong possibility of adding an indoor walking track. I come from a small town called Mount Pleasant in southeast Iowa. It is a town of 8,000 people. This little town has an indoor walking track and has for many years. But a town of 66,000, we make our residents who wish to walk in the wintertime, we make them go to the mall. It's crazy. And we need to take that seriously. And so this is an opportunity. I know our focus is on the pool, but the opportunity to add that amenity is very important. One of the difficult challenges about this topic has been the way in which we've received input. And this has been strongly hampered by the news coverage. We know that prior to COVID, the indoor pool received 49,000 visits per year. And that should weigh heavily on us. So we have heard from, let's say, 100 neighbors who were very outspoken in their opposition for the O'Neill site. But how do we begin to balance this against the 49,000 visits at an indoor pool that we know would have concerns? And I am convinced that the broad community has no idea of what is really going on. And so I'm offering myself to speak tonight for those families who have children who want a safe location for a pool. We have a fear on this dais of a reverse referendum. And I want to be clear, I'm not afraid of the democratic process. I think it'd be fine if we have a reverse referendum. So if the reverse referendum is successful and we aren't able to go forward with the O'Neill site, what kind of victory is that for those who are behind it? They would achieve the goal of siting this pool at a contaminated site, or we forfeit the $10 million of state funds. And I don't want to forfeit the $10 million, which would be very important for this community. That would be quite a triumph for those who promoted that. I'm not afraid of the democratic process. So, Council, we were elected to make very hard decisions, and sometimes we have to make decisions that upset the needs of the few because of the importance to the community as a whole. This is not easy. It is not fun. It is not something we take lightly. And I want to suggest to you, there will be other such decisions ahead of us. if we are serious about infill projects, that's necessarily going to mean making neighbors unhappy. And so are we going to put all of our growth in this community on the exterior? Are we ever going to be able to cite important amenities within the interior of our community? My friends, this is an opportunity for us to demonstrate that we have the courage to make hard decisions. And I think this is clearly a place where we need to do that. And I want to come back to this issue of the contaminated site. We do not understand the risks at the end of the day. And there's no easy answers here. And I am unwilling to put our children's health and safety at risk. This is a concern to me for the health and well-being of the residents that we are sworn to serve, but it also impacts the liability exposure of this community. If there are children who have a diagnosis of cancer, who were frequent users of the pool, I think there's a strong likelihood that there will be lawyers that will be more than happy to bring a suit against us. And all those emails, and this city council meeting in particular, is going to be reviewed time and time again for whether we follow protocols that met the burden of proof that we knew going forward that this site was safe. I, for one, am not convinced. I believe that to cite a swimming pool used by our most vulnerable residents would violate our commitments to equity. I am not at all persuaded that this is an environmental issue. If we're going to grow this community by 15,000 people, we're going to pour a lot of concrete. So the footprint of this pool on this site is minuscule. It has, in terms of environmental impact, no impact. It would be a loss of green space, and I recognize this, but let's not pretend for a moment that this has any impact in our efforts to reduce global warming. We're going to be pouring a lot of concrete in the next 15 years. My hope is that if this does go forward, no one is injured, no one gets sick, but this will be because of God's grace and not because of the thoughtful siting of this pool. So I would request, and I would encourage council to think very hard about this and consider supporting the O'Neill site to locate this pool.
Anita? Thoughts?
Sure. So while we have heard reiterated again.
Can you get closer to your mic, please? Thank you.
Yes, let's see. While we have heard, again, about the contamination that's on the site, I would have to say that the fear that I'm hearing is actually about whether or not you trust the experts that have come to us that have said it is possible. It is possible to remediate. It is possible to be on this site. It is possible to take care of the contamination. And I would say that in the past, the city has been successful in doing that. When the Hunsiker Sports Complex was built, finished, and that was another site in which there was contamination and people were concerned. That site is well used and there isn't contamination on that site. And while I realized we had an email where we had another expert opinion who stated that although the two sites were different, she also stated it was still possible to remediate the contamination on the current site and that it has been done successfully in other places. So I would say that the fear that you have, while I respect that, I think may be misplaced in this situation. I would also say that in terms of the cost, there is still potentially going to be as great a cost on the if we would move to O'Neill as if we would stay with the current site. Once we get another couple of years down the road when the same tests have been applied to another site, the costs could be much higher. There's no guarantee that we would be in any different position in terms of a track or other things. And there's nothing to say that council still can't decide to do that at the current site if that is something that we believe is needed in the community. Also, from the standpoint of equity, I just can't support replacing a neighborhood park in an area that is one of the few affordable neighborhoods and injecting 49,000 travelers to that neighborhood. They've already taken on, as we've talked about before, apartment complexes and other things in their area. I don't think that they should be the ones to take that burden. So those are my points.
Thank you. Amber.
So I also want to start just by thanking staff, especially Keith and Brian and Steve for all the work they've put in. This project has gone through a lot of iterations, and we are at where we're at today, not because staff didn't do their due diligence, but partially because the DOT provided us with inaccurate information and has been really difficult to work with to attempt to resolve the issue. Personally, as a resident and taxpayer, it makes me angry that we'll be on the hook for something if we move forward with the DOT site that the state has known about for many, many years. And if I were a DOT employee working at that site for the last couple of decades, I'd probably be pretty upset too about the lack of information regarding the contamination. To Tim's point, I don't think that any of us up here can say with certainty that we know what the community wants us to do. There's passionate people on both sides of the issue, and the reality is that we've only heard from a very small percentage of the neighborhood and the community. And good decisions are not made by the number of emails that we receive on a particular issue. So I appreciate the way that staff has laid out the pros and cons for each of the sites. Personally, I think that either site would be a great location for this facility, and that in the end, each would result in a pool and a project that would be an asset to the entire community. But for me, it really comes down to timing. I have been on council for 9 years, and we have been talking about a replacement to municipal pool since before I was even elected. And I realize that these are hard decisions and we need to get things right, but it's very difficult to continue to watch communities around us build amenities like pools and rec centers with ease. Things are hard here, and there are different reasons for that, but I think that this community has waited long enough for us to find a replacement. And so the quickest way forward for me is a DOT site. And frankly, after the way that the state has been unwilling to work with us throughout this process, I trust us far more than anyone else to clean up the site in the best way possible, even though the higher price tag is a very difficult pill to swallow. And so I will be voting to move forward with the DOT site, but I am going to continue to advocate that even with the higher cost for that particular location, that we not sacrifice on the design and that we work to find the money to make sure that we build the best facility possible, because again, we've waited far too long and this community deserves something that we can all be proud of. And I really hope that everyone else who has advocated for this property does the same and supports perhaps contributing a few more of their tax dollars to making this the best facility it can be.
Thank you. Rachel?
So I think an important piece in this very long project is the reinvestment district money. And the reason that we've gone forward with the DOT site to begin with, as opposed to looking to sites around the community, is with the possibility of those $10 million in mind to help reduce the burden on the taxpayer. And I really disagree with you, Tim, on forfeiting the money. I think it's a very strong possibility that we could forfeit this money if we move sites off of the DOT site into the O'Neill one. We would have to rearrange the boundaries. It would have to be approved by the committee. I think that amount of money, it's very possible that we could lose by going to a new site. I think out of two bad options, sticking with the DOT site is the best of our options at this point, due to that possibility of sacrificing the reinvestment district money. Overall, we need to clean this up, and I trust that the city can do it well and safely, and that we'll have success in remediating the contamination and making this a safe site for our indoor aquatic center. This is also in line with our Lincoln Way corridor plan. I think this will be a great amenity to bring to Lincoln Way that will pull the whole area together and really be in line with the reinvestment district ideals. And I think the delays that we would have in moving to a different site would also raise prices, maybe even equal to or surpassing the extra cost of the remediation, or the extra costs in general of construction cost rising for waiting for that site. So as of right now, I'm in favor of sticking with the DOT site.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, for those of you in the audience who brought us your thoughts on this topic, or for those watching at home that have done that, again, thank you for reaching out. We read all your emails. I'm sorry if I haven't responded to them all, but there were a lot. And I think it shows that not only are the public really passionate about having a pool where folks can swim and get exercise and learn how to swim, which is a valuable skill, but also they care deeply about O'Neill Park too. And I don't feel like I'm just weighing how many people want it here and how many there. I've thought through all the issues too. So it's not just the feedback, right? But I've considered the pros and cons of both locations. And it was really actually very hard to weigh all those moving pieces. Because what a lot of Tim said, I do agree with. Like a project at O'Neill, we could dream big there and do some things with the funding we otherwise would spend at the DOT site and have a really nice project there that I think people would come to love, right? I do think they would in time look back and like having it in their neighborhood. But I really have ultimately come to favor the DOT site. And it's for a lot of the reasons that everyone else spoke so eloquently on before that I can't really add much to that other than that I think that we can mitigate the risks at the DOT site. In fact, I think we are well positioned to do that, to successfully mitigate those risks, as a couple of people said. And also just that yes, we might spend more by properly redeveloping the DOT site than we would by putting the same facility at O'Neill, but that's worth it to properly deal with the brownfield site as opposed to take away a neighborhood park that is accessible to everybody. So I think it's been very difficult, and I'm certainly appreciative of some of Tim's points too. Again, I just think that we can handle the risk. So thank you.
Bryce, I'd welcome your feedback, and you can offer it without having to vote.
Well, I'm kind of glad that I don't have to be a part of the decision making on this. But I'm still fairly new. I've only been here about 3 months, so this is catching up on this whole long process has been a lot. I would say, as to Bronwyn's point, the amount of emails that the council has gotten in regards to this, I would say is pretty fascinating. Just the fact that Ames residents have been so involved in this and, feel like they can come to the council to voice their opinions. But yeah, anything that I say is kind of repetitive to what everyone else is saying. But after, reading the pros and cons list and all of this stuff, I do more towards lean to the DOT site for almost in my head. All the notes that I was compiling is everything that everyone's already said. So
thank you. All right. Any closing comments? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion on direction.
Mayor, just briefly, the votes are what they are, but briefly, one of my concerns from a 10,000-foot perspective is how expediency is driving this discussion. So in the life of a city, a year or 2 years is nothing. We won't remember when a particular building is built as much as we would like to have it now, we need to do it right. And the community is counting on us to get this right. We speak about being a data-driven city. It is baffling to me how this decision comports with that. Tonight, we listened to Keith lay out the concerns with the presence of benzene and other toxins in the soil. And Anita, you make the point about my fear being misplaced. I guess time will tell. But I'm channeling the fear of a lot of dads and moms who simply want a safe place for their kids to be able to swim and enjoy their time in Ames. And how many cities do we have across this country where we make decisions based on expediency, and the people who suffer are the people who are poor? They get the worst facilities. And I worry, I do fear, I am worried that we will look back on tonight and say, wow, we made a hasty decision. Not an easy decision. This is a hasty decision. And thankfully, we have a council. We can disagree without being disagreeable. I respect all of your positions. And ultimately, we have to move on and come together. Thank you.
John, could I just respond a little bit to what Tim just said, and also go back to his earlier comments about the reverse referendum? I don't presume to speak for others up here on the dais, but I don't fear a reverse referendum. I welcome it. It's not in my mind that we have to be expedient about this decision. I am probably not going to be the prime aquatic center user. And honestly, I don't think we have spent nearly as long considering the O'Neill Park site as we've considered other sites in the past. So, putting the brakes on, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But when I look at the pros and cons, I'm not looking at it through a lens of fear. I'm looking at it through a lens of what the community seems to want, based on years of hearing from people that they want an aquatic center, they want more facilities. I'm also trying to trust the experts, because I am not an expert on remediation of toxic sites, but I know that brownfield rehabilitation is one of the best ways to do infill and to reclaim sites that have not been able to be used in the past. And so to me, we are getting it right by looking at ways that we can use that land and that we can be responsible users of that land by remediating it. And I don't think it's a hasty decision. I think that any of us up here, if we hadn't been through this process for years, would probably be looking at this a little bit differently, but I don't think it's been hasty. And I'm hoping that we'll feel we got it right in the end.
Thank you. All right, is there a motion? Go ahead, Brett.
Sure. I would move that we direct staff to proceed with the DOT location for the Fitch Family Indoor Aquatic Center.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Nay.
Aye.
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 Thank you. All right, next step, Steve, can you share with us what the next step's going to be?
Well, the next steps, we'll begin discussing the acquisition agreement with the DOT. I think that's the next person we'll talk to. Also, we'll bring forward to you the contracts with the construction manager and the design architect, so we can move ahead on that. There'll also be, in accordance with your CIP, probably next month, we'll be issuing bonds. So I think $6 million out of the local $21 million. We're going to issue bonds for to help us with the land acquisition and start paying those two consulting firms. So there's a little bit of work yet to do. We want to move as quickly as possible so we can begin construction process as soon as possible.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Keith. All right, we're going to move on to item 29, staff report regarding North Dayton Industrial Park TIF agreement.
Good evening, council. Tonight, we're here at a request of a developer that we have looked at for moving forward with a development agreement for the small lot TIF industrial subdivision on North Dayton. As we described in the staff report back in April, you reviewed a proposal. We had draft terms at that point in time, and you directed staff to move forward with that description of a project, move towards a development agreement, and that the developer would move into the preliminary plat stage to put the subdivision design together for that project, and eventually return when there was more detail on the cost of the project to finalize that agreement. So the developer has moved forward in preparing a preliminary plat. As he's gone through that effort, he has proposed to change the layout of the subdivision in terms of the total number of lots. So why we are here tonight is the total number of lots has been reduced, and most importantly, the small lot component, which is the size between 1 and 3 acres, is now proposed to be at 5 lots, which is less than the 7 in the spring, and it's also 1 less than the original RFP. So for staff to move forward on this development agreement review, we need to know if City Council is interested in reviewing and continuing with this preliminary plat process with essentially 1 less small lot in the project and some other variations in the total lots and lot sizes as described in the report. So if you direct staff to move forward with this, then we will continue on the path from April, return to you later this fall with an actual preliminary plat and a development agreement. If there is no action to move forward with the reduced lots, we will go back to the developer and see if they're interested in modifying that plat to go back to the design from April.
Our recommendation was?
We had as a staff report, we find that either option is really can be found consistent with the intent of the council. The RFP had a stated goal. Since this was the only responder to the proposal, it's really up to council's discretion to modify that proposal at this point in the process. So staff is really deferring back to council, and you could find it in either way. You could find it to be consistent with your RFP.
Questions for staff?
Kelly, when we determined the size of small lots versus large lots, what was the basis for that decision for the RFP?
So a lot of the original RFP was looking back at how the Ames Community Development Park phases over the last 20 years had been done through TIF incentives. And what we had saw was a pattern that essentially the lots less than 3 acres in size were considered the true small lots. And we have some speculative building requirements that only apply to the smallest of the lots. I think overall 10 acres and under is still relatively small for industrial. So we did have a cap at 10 acres. We definitely had an interest not to be looking at larger sites with this project. So we had the smallest of the lots were really focused on the spec building requirement. And then these medium-sized 3 to 10 acre lots were still relatively small, but they didn't have the same standards as the smallest. So that 1 to 3 really came from the history of how Ames Community Development Park has been developed on South Bell.
Thank you.
There wasn't any magic to the 10 acre maximum, was there?
Not really. Again, a lot of the history has been, the most recent project did not have any lots over 10, had a set of lots that were roughly 1.5 to 2 acres in size were the smaller lots. And we changed that to 1 to 3 in this situation.
Yeah. And the change now are for 2 lots that are about 10.4, 10.6 acres, which is pretty de minimis in terms of change.
All right, open up public input. Does anyone want to offer any comment on this item tonight? Seeing none, we'll close public input. Council, any additional discussion on this item? All right, entertain a motion. There's 2 options presented in the council action form.
I would move that we approve option 1.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Very good. Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 30, and council, before Damian starts, I'm going to invite Mark. He had just a clarification on item number 30 and 32 as it is recorded on the agenda. So, Mark?
Good evening. Items 30 and 32, I just want to make a correction to the agenda. Both of those items list the development agreement and then the hangar lease as being with Summit Agricultural Group, LLC. That was who was being dealt with and putting together the agreements. Somewhere toward the very end, they said, oh, wait, we want to put this under another LLC, which is Summit Aviation LLC. And so the lease agreements, the two different agreements are both under those names, and those are correct in the packet. It never got changed on the agenda, and in the council action form, it still refers to Summit Agricultural instead of Summit Aviation. So I just want to make that correction. We make corrections to agenda items all the time, and that, the mayor did that with one item on the consent agenda. So, but I just want to explain that was, it was just an error to not alter the items on the agenda when they decided on going under a different LLC. But it's the same people. It's just a separate LLC that they have. So.
And you're comfortable with council taking action on the item with the fact that it was Summit Aviation LLC in lieu of
Yes.
what's on the agenda?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Very good.
Any questions?
Questions for Mark?
Okay.
Thanks. Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Damian, John?
Good evening. So the first item tonight, and actually the next couple items in the council agenda are all interrelated, obviously conditional upon each other. But this item in particular is a development agreement. And so as you can see on the council action form, that we've gone through a fairly lengthy process that we do with all developments. So they went to our development review committee, they submitted a plan, all the various respective staff members made comment on, and they got a conditional approval for the proposed site, which is essentially to the north and west of the old terminal building. The airport master plan anticipated 2 hangars to be fit north of the and west of that itinerary area. So this proposal is in accordance with the airport master plan. A couple of items I think are maybe noteworthy is that we'll need a land lease. So one of the conditional items of this agreement is that they get a land lease similar to all the other private hangar land leases. Normally, an airport would have the responsibility to somewhat kind of prepare the site, if you can think about that, to get it ready for development. So this development agreement has a provision that up to $90,000, no more than $6,000 a year, we'll reimburse Summit for essentially demolishing the old ramp service building. That's kind of a yellowy curved roof building that's there. And around $30,000, at least from an estimate standpoint, is for asbestos abatement because the building has very minor asbestos in it. But one thing I should point out is that it's up to $90,000 based on actual cost. So at some point, Summit will have to submit a demo cost and an abatement cost, and then we will get a total, and at $6,000 a year, that's what the rebate, until that actual cost is expended. Tried to put together an estimate. Obviously, as time goes on, we'll see what the actual revenues are, but based upon the scope of the proposal, the airport should see around $4,300 in the first year. And obviously, as time goes on, either their usage or for sure the land lease rate goes up at 2.7% per year. So it seems to be a good financial benefit for the airport. If there's any questions about the development agreement, I'd be happy to try and answer those. But that's the first item.
Questions for staff?
Damian, I see on the material that there is a fuel tank area. So will this am I correct in that this hangar will have its own opportunity for refueling there on its own?
It would be similar to the other, there's two hangars on the east side of the airport that have private fuel storage, and they're asking for a similar thing. So yes, they would have their own fuel tank, assuming they can meet all the building and fire code standards.
And could you remind us how the fuel works? If someone is getting their fuel through the FBO as opposed to bringing in their own fuel, how does that work?
Yeah, so the way it's structured is that if you want to have private fuel storage, you have to get all the permits and agree to meet all the fire codes. But from a financial perspective, if you have an exclusive fuel agreement with our FBO, meaning, you know, we charge the FBO a fairly sizable sum to operate our airport, and in return, they're allowed to operate a business there. One of the business perks of doing that, and reason why we're getting paid for it, is for them to sell fuel. None of these private hangars can do that. So if they choose to support the FBO, we waive essentially the land area that tank is on. So because the FBO, under their contract, has rights on the airport to sell fuel. So they, anywhere on the property, I mean, obviously up to our discretion where these tanks are. Now, that's one option. They support the FBO. There's no additional land cost. If they want to go and bring in a third party, it doesn't seem right and fair that they should be able to use our property for free and not have any kind of financial benefit. So we use the same land lease rate that the footprint of the hangar is, that starting out at 35 cents, and we apply it essentially to the fire code buffer area. So depending on the tank, this tank would require a 25-foot radius. Just take simple geometry and come up with a 35 cents times that 25-foot radius buffer. And then, and that's what Summit is actually proposing, is that they would be getting third-party fuel. So their lease would have an additional, you can see it in here, around $600, $700 the first year. And it would go up at the same rate because it's a land lease rate, whether it's for the fuel tank or for the hangar. It's the use of the airport's land.
And one last question. So I just want to make sure from a council perspective, we're treating like parties the same way. So is the way in which we're handling the fuel tank for this location the same as the other hangars are being treated?
Yes, absolutely. The only difference with this one is that it's a brand new tank. So there, under the fire code, there is a protected and an unprotected tank standard. So the existing tanks have a 50-foot radius because they were installed at a fire code rating that didn't meet the protected standard. This one, they are going to pay for a higher, more expensive tank. I suppose if you think about it, the existing private hangars, they could invest in a new tank and get a smaller radius, but they're under a 50-foot standard because their tanks meet that particular fire code standard. Summit is building to a higher fire code standard, so they have a smaller radius.
Okay, thanks.
And they have to pay the flowage fee to the city.
Yes, so that's just for the use of the land, the encumbrance of the land by the fuel tank. Then they pay us the rate that's established in the FBO agreement at 8 cents a gallon.
Same amount.
Yep. So because they're a third party as well, we read their meters and bill them separately.
Okay, thanks.
So how does the FPO view this if they're going to lose revenue that they might get otherwise? Is that an issue for them, or is it just new customer? Or I mean, they're completely in agreement with this change?
Well, I would hate to speak for them, but what I do know is that yes, they would like the opportunity to sell fuel to them, but the FAA will not allow you to forcibly. We cannot force an airport user to buy the FBO's fuel. So they can provide other services such as aircraft maintenance, and everybody on the field, because of the nature of discretionary grants, which is one of the major funding sources of the airport, the more based aircraft we have, the better we score, and the more likely we get discretionary grants. So if you think about it that way, everybody, including the FBO, benefits the more aviation activity there is at the airport. So if we want to get like the runway rebuilt, maybe we would get that money, I'm making this up, but maybe we would get that money once every 10 years. Now with a couple based jets, our ranking goes up, maybe we get that money once every 5 years or something to that effect. So we would just score much better and they would benefit from that.
These are new customers, or these are new tenants or occupants for the airport, not existing ones that are just building a new hangar.
They have a presence on the airfield now. I think this investment would demonstrate an increase in activity.
Other questions for staff? All right, open public input. Does anyone want to address council on this item? Seeing none, I'll close public input. Any closing questions or comments?
This is another exciting project. When we went forward with the airport improvements, there was some hope that it would be catalytic for future development. And this is just one more installment that we're saying. And it may be that the community, there may be many of the community that don't ever fly in and out of this airport. I encourage people to go out and take a look and see kinds of things. I'm very proud of the fact that our airport is growing, and this is just sort of the next step, and excited for the things to come.
All right, I entertain a motion on resolution approving development agreement with Summit Aviation LLC for a new private hangar at the Ames Municipal Airport.
Move alternative 1.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Item 31.
So one of the items that is, as I mentioned earlier, is related to this agreement is that under the FBO contract, this building that would be, that is currently on the site that we refer to as the old ramp service building is in the FBO's contract as one of the city facilities made available to them that they are paying the city to use as part of their business. Obviously, they've been in communications throughout this entire process. They understand that it was coming. So one of the items to address the loss of this building is an addendum to their agreement. So we met several times and came to the conditions that you can see in that addendum. But this is just reflective of the loss of the building to make their contract whole after this hangar gets built.
Questions? Open up public comment on this item. Is there anyone who wants to address council on item 31? Seeing none, we'll close public input. Entertain a motion resolution approving addendum to the fixed base operator agreement with Charles City Aeronautics Incorporated doing business as Central Iowa Air Service to remove the ramp service building.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Okay. Item 32, you want to make any comments on this one?
I think the only thing to point out is that the structure of this lease is identical to all the other private hangar leases on the airport, except for one exception, and that is the city's, the airport's right to terminate the lease. So we worked with the various legal staffs on both the city side and Summit side because the lender, the way it's written for the other private leases that don't have a mortgage, the way that language is written, they would not be able to get financing for this project. So what we said is essentially during the time period in which they would have a mortgage for the first, I believe, 20 years, that it would be based upon the FAA coming to the city and to the airport and saying, we have a regulatory change, you have to terminate that space. Obviously, I mean, it would be extremely unlikely. And any kind of FAA change to that effect would be a national change. It wouldn't be because of something Ames did or whatnot. And then after that time period, and we expect the building to be paid off and no longer have a mortgage on it, it would revert back to the same language that all the other leases had. That's really the only difference in this lease versus the other private hangar leases.
Okay. Questions for Damian?
I appreciate the flexibility that we're providing here. That financing piece, not everyone's going to be able to pay cash for this, and so being able to finance it makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate the city's flexibility in working with the party on this.
All right, declare the public hearing on long-term private hangar land lease at Ames Municipal Airport to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council under this item? Seeing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion on resolution approving lease for 10 5-year periods with Summit Aviation LLC.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Thanks, Damian. Thank you, John. Moving on to item number 33, hearing on rezoning with Master Plan 3898 University Boulevard from RI with a revised master plan. Kelly.
Good evening. So this is a little bit of a unique rezoning request. Normally, a master plan is something that's affiliated with a specific development project. With the Research Park Phase 3, we created a new zoning district to look at that area more as an innovation area that allowed for a mix of commercial and industrial activities. So as part of that zoning district, even though it was not for a singular project, it references the option for commercial uses within an area designated as the hub. That's based on that Collaboration Way area where there are some commercial buildings in that location. So for the research park to take advantage of that area to be a commercial use rather than industrial, the master plan needs to reflect that. So Ames Fitness is on the south side of Collaboration Way. They're within the hub area. Previously, council had allowed for a slight expansion of the hub area to allow for the tennis bubbles to be built in that area. As that area has been popular and there's a desire to have more tennis facilities in that back corner of the Ames Fitness area, they've asked for another 6 areas to be allocated to commercial use. So although the research park zoning will remain in place, the action tonight is to amend the hub area location, which would add those 6 acres. Staff is able to support this primarily because it's still leaving a significant amount of land along University Boulevard that meets our intent for industrial expansion and employment expansion in that area. We noted that they would, with this change, Ames Fitness would be trying to acquire some of the 6 acres from the research park themselves. So when that lot line adjustment comes in as a plat of survey, we will have to make a corresponding correction to our TIF district. We can't have taxing districts split a property. So ultimately, when this property is changed, adjusted, and made bigger, I'll be back to you to make a TIF ordinance adjustment to make sure that we continue to collect the TIF that comes from the Ames Fitness property. We only have like 1.5 years of debt payments left on that TIF. So we're pretty close to paying off that investment in this area. But we definitely don't want to lose the payment from the Ames Fitness Center. So that's an indirect outcome of this if you move forward with it.
Questions for Kelly? Kelly, I just have one question on the graphic. It shows the red area for the Ames Fitness Center expansion, but along South Riverside Drive, there's a blue rectangle that says area of master plan expansion. Is that also included in this motion?
Yeah, it is. So we try to describe that in the report. So when Research Park first came in with Phase 3, they did not own the property on Riverside. So since they made the master plan, they left it out of their master plan at that time. However, the city has already rezoned it to RI. So they now own that land. I just asked to clean up the exhibit and put that in as research industrial area, which if we had not, that's still what was allowed there. It was never hub area, so it would be research and industrial. So it's a cleanup by the fact that they now own that property and they didn't originally.
Okay. Is there anything in the motion that's forthcoming relative to that, or is it just?
It's depicted on the master plan. So if you pick alternative 1, that will be included already in acceptance of that revised master plan.
All right. All right, declare the public hearing on rezoning with master plan 3898 University Boulevard from RI to RI with a revised master plan. Is there anyone that wants to address council on this item? Seeing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion on first passage of ordinance.
Move on first.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Very good. All right, item 34, first passage of ordinance prohibiting parking at all times on east side of Hoover Avenue from 24th Street to 30th Street and from Bloomington Road to Adams Street. Any questions for staff on this item? I'll open up public input. Is there anyone that wants to address council on item number 34 tonight? If you would state your name and your address, and you may begin.
Grant Olson, 3812 Ontario Street. Staff believes the proposed change will, quote, improve safety and traffic flow, unquote. We can have improved traffic, or rather improved safety for all modes, or improved car flow. We unfortunately cannot have both on Hoover and other streets. Let's think of a street like a drain pipe. When does water slow down in a drain pipe? When stuff collects on the side of the pipe. If we remove what is on the interior walls of the pipe, the water will flow faster. Repeated with substitutions, if we clear parking on the side of a street, the cars will flow faster. If cars flow faster, the conditions for people outside cars are less safe. The paradox of street design is that when the street feels dangerous, it is usually safer. The odds of a traffic fatality on narrow Main Street are much lower than the odds of a death in a 45 speed limit section of Duff Avenue. If my fourth grader is walking in a crosswalk and is hit, it is not the screen that the driver is looking at that will kill my son. The cause of death will be listed as blunt force trauma, emphasis on the word force. Force is the weight of the vehicle multiplied by speed. The faster the car is traveling at impact, the greater the chance that the pedestrian will die. If we want safer streets for ages 8 to 80, we need to have slower streets. To have slower streets, we need to keep the friction that current parking rules on Hoover can create. Please vote for option 2. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else want to address council? We'll close public input. Steve, can you comment on how this, wasn't this a request from a resident?
They said, did they leave?
Looks like Damien left.
Yeah, it was my understanding when they started talking about redoing the project with it, people brought that forward, and that's what instituted, but staff agrees with it. No, I can't say there were the majority of the citizens or
Yeah.
it was one or two. I'm not saying it represented everybody on the block.
Could you remind us, I mean, we've changed parking on a number of streets, and do you happen to know what the rationale was on this particular street?
Well, it looks like it's, so it's allowed on both, and for the rest of the street, it's only allowed on one side of the street. And so this proposal is to take it away from one side so that it matches the rest of the roadway where it's only allowed on one side.
Yeah, if I recall, when Public Works was working on the project for the reconstruction, they realized that the width of the street does not meet the current standards for a street to have parking on both sides of the street. So it's too narrow to accommodate parking on both sides of the street if we were to build it brand new today.
There is a section that could allow it on both sides, I believe, but it's wider in that section.
Right, that's what this is.
So right now it's allowed on both sides of the street. So to follow Mr. Olson's analogy, we're actually opening up the pipe.
Yeah, that's what he means.
Yes.
That's what Mr. Olson is meaning. So, I mean, I would.
He advocates for alternative number 2, which is make no changes in parking regulation along Hoover at this
Right.
time, which would mean allowing parking on both sides,
Yes.
which actually seems to be counterintuitive to
Well, he's saying that because of parking being on both sides, that when you're traveling down that road, it feels a little more cramped, and so you have a less tendency to
Got it.
speed. So his argument is when you open up one,
Yep.
people go
Got
faster.
it.
But I would say, I mean, I have several thoughts about parking. Like in general, I like to take it away when I can. Like I think that's better for multimodal culture shift, right? To not have parking everywhere. So pretty much anytime you say to me, hey, there's parking on two sides of the street, what do you feel about taking it away? I like that. And it's because I want to encourage multimodal transportation, right? Not because I don't. So that's an interesting thought that you make. But it also, like, Northwestern would be a good example of where we could slap in bike lanes if there weren't parking on both sides, but to take it away once it's already there is kind of tricky. So I'm tempted to say, yeah, go ahead and take it away here, because then if we do ever want to put, bike lanes on the road, at least half the parking's already gone, right?
I'm also thinking maybe taking some of this away would help visibility for crossing Bloomington.
It's interesting. I mean, I get his point though.
But,
But I usually like taking parking away. So that's.
Brian, do you know offhand if the width of the street, which was it 31 feet, is the street 31 feet or is that yeah, it's only 31 feet.
Well, it says
And there's currently parking on both sides.
doesn't meet the current standard.
Does that allow emergency vehicles to get through that area easily?
I don't
Do we
know
know?
that answer
Okay.
right now.
Because I know that's been one of our
We've always been
concerns.
told that they will get through.
Yes, but we've been hearing more and more lately that it's a greater concern. So
It's very
that's
clear, it doesn't meet the city standard of width, that's why they're.
right.
And we send out.
I guess the
letters.
question is that standard set because we need to have the ability to get emergency vehicles through, and therefore we don't want to have the parking on both sides?
I think that's one of the reasons. Of course, when it snows, you have a different problem. It looks wide now, but when it snows, it gets packed in, you move around, but that's basically one of the standards for why you have it. It's not unusual for us to do this.
So,
And I don't know the response from the other members of the neighborhood. I don't think we received any objection. No, I don't know if that means they support it either. I guess you could argue.
When you take
They
it
didn't
away,
pay
they'll be like,
attention.
oh, my spot.
Yeah.
Well, I can understand the argument that we were presented with because parking on both sides is a traffic calming
Sure.
strategy. So I understand that.
Well, there's twice the door zone for people to open their door while you're biking by. I don't know, but I don't know if that would happen much on this road, but.
Okay, there's two alternatives.
So, I mean, my thought is, I want to push back just a little bit that we should like to take parking away when we can, that would somehow be.
I know that not many people, that's pretty radical, so nobody has to share that opinion with me. That's just my opinion on parking.
But so parking is an important aspect of a person's home, and depending on where you are and whether you have a garage, there are people here who don't have a garage and they depend on street parking.
For their car.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm just saying a lot of parking contributes to an automobile-centric culture.
But I don't want to use the power of regulation to punish people. I mean,
Yeah, no.
there are a lot of people who live in this area that are older and for whom this might be a challenge for them. They're not going to ride a bike as much. And so
I'm guessing there's plenty of driveway parking in this neighborhood.
Okay, so I'm just going to go back to council action form, and it talks about the fact that public outreach during pavement improvement, public comments were received regarding parking regulations. Staff evaluated the comments, and the main issue is parking is allowed on both sides of the road. And current standards would allow parking only on one side of the road for this width. So I guess the options are we can either table this or move forward with
I'm trying to
the,
get Damian back on the line if you have questions.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I would say I'd move alternative one.
okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay,
I like,
Do you want to talk to Damian? Or-
Anybody want to hear a question for Damien or not?
No.
Nope.
It's a policy.
Well,
All right.
ask him if it's safe.
Well, it's
I
in,
mean,
the,
that's-
it's in the report. All right, roll call.
I would just,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just want to say, I mean, I appreciate the thoughts. I mean, I think I'd have to think more about that because this is sort of it's a spur of the moment comment for the concept. So I'll think more about that. But in general, I like taking parking away. So. Not that everyone else does.
Okay. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Okay. Item 35, entertain motion on second passage of rezoning with master plan 798 North 500th Avenue from A agricultural to FSRL floating suburban residential low density.
Move on second.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 And entertain a motion on third passage and adoption of ordinance number 4476, adopting the zoning text amendment as amended to reduce medical parking rates for buildings fewer than 50,000 square feet and update medical office definitions.
Move on third.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Okay, we have two communications to council. First is a letter from Dylan Klein, Director of Business Development, Ames Economic Development Commission. You all had received a copy of it. And with respect to facade grants being tied to tax abatement.
I think it might be good to have a refer for a memo. We can give you background on it
Mm-hmm.
if you like background. No, you would like.
Move we ask staff for a memo with the background.
Second.
Okay, those in favor of the motion.
What you said.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. And then we have an email from Roxanne Strike regarding the availability of affordable housing in Ames.
So I would like to move that we refer this to staff with the idea just to provide from that June 30th email where there are 4 bullets, just to respond back about what we can say in Ames about the current state of affordable housing. But it's also appropriate, I would think, in this communication to say which things will be coming forward, because I know we're going to be having an affordable housing workshop or something at some
Correct.
time. So I think it's all right to make that part of the response as well.
Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Council comments. Bryce, we'll start with you tonight.
I don't have anything.
Okay, Brahma,
Nothing for me. Thanks.
Rachel,
Nothing tonight.
Nothing for me.
Nita?
Anxious to hear about 801 today, but it appeared initially that some of the strategies were successful, so I look forward to hearing more.
Okay, Tim?
So normally council has sort of an informal rule about trying to give council at least a week's heads up regarding any proposals. I'm going to ask council to suspend that informal rule with respect to a proposal I sent today because there's a timing issue. So we're in the process of circulating a posting for a DEI position for the city. And so the mayor and assistant city manager and I visited Dubuque and had a presentation from a gentleman named Director Anderson Sansi, Director of Office of Shared Prosperity and Neighborhood Support. And it was very impressive, and I provided council more information. And I would like to propose that we reach out to Director Sansi and find a time that is compatible with his schedule and ours to learn more about that position and whether there would be some interest of council to clarify our DEI role. I think this is sort of an exciting opportunity. Encourage council to take a look at the video clip that I included.
Is there a second? A motion?
Yeah, that is a motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion?
What would that do to the putting out the call for applicants? I mean, if we're gonna have this person, so that would put that on hold, you're saying? We'd put
Just
that,
temporarily, so that the position hasn't been posted yet. And so the goal of this would be to try to clarify the role of that. I think that this is sort of an exciting possibility for the community. I don't think that we have, and Steve can maybe speak to this better than I can from a budgetary perspective, it would be a lot to add 2 FTEs. I think once the council has a chance to see this, I think there would be some opportunities to see some value in clarifying this DEI role.
So in Dubuque, they have 2 full-time positions, and you're suggesting that this be added on to the responsibilities of already a 1 full-time
Yeah.
position here.
So communities differ in terms of, you can have one position in one community that is appropriate and wouldn't be appropriate somewhere else. So I would leave the responsibility of job description, those kind of things should be with Steve. But Steve, do you have any comments on this proposal?
Well, I don't know exactly what you heard, but I think I think it'd be easy to add, just to clarify and add some of the responsibilities or some of those issues into the job description. I don't know if we need a presentation or not. I mean, I think we can find out about it and add that one responsibility.
Yeah,
I
I'm
think-
actually supportive of learning more, but if I'm being honest, I don't want to have a workshop about it. I would just rather get some information from staff.
Well, I'm in favor of learning more, but this seems to come at the 9th hour, and I don't know what staff thinks about the delay that could be incurred. It seems to me like a bigger issue than just, let's change the job description. It's maybe, do we need to have 2 individuals instead of 1? Because I think part of our discussion was already that this one position was going to take on a lot of things. And so to add more does not seem on the face of it to be a good idea at this stage. And I'm aware of the Dubuque situation. So
Maybe it would be nice just to get, I guess I wasn't aware that this position was taking on like a significant amount of
No.
responsibilities.
Nope, I don't know what the expectation is of Tim. I think Brian pointed out a lot of the stuff they're doing, this position is doing, we have done by our
Yeah.
human service agencies where they track a lot of the data. So it's not going to be exactly parallel. I don't think they have the wherewithal that we have in this community to do that. But I think it has to do with emphasizing poverty and dealing with people poverty. But I think when we talk about inclusiveness, and that's when it's not just internally. Remember, we're going to help the Ames Human Relations Commission and outreach. It shouldn't be just seen as, inclusion shouldn't be seen focusing only on race or everything. So it could be income, it could be those. So I don't have any problem adding that if it needs to be clarified. We've tried to write it generically because once you start identifying a certain category, you never stop because people say, I don't see it in there. So we just talk about coordinating the effort for inclusiveness and equity throughout the community within the organization and then working with the Ames Human Relations Commission. But if you want to make a statement about poverty, which is that's guaranteed. I don't know if you need the words to see the words in the job description. We're really not ever that specific.
So, I want to defer to council on this.
I hope there would be assignment maybe you give to the Human Relations Commission now too, to get out on that topic because again, this person now they have a staff person to help them do things.
So
I think that's what you want to do. You say, just don't focus on perhaps, I'll use race as an example. It's a broader, equity inclusion is broader than that. And that's a message you might want to, you're going to have to, now you're going to have the ability to be with your Ames Human Relations Commission and say, I want you to be proactive. Before they said the impediment was they were either working on investigations, which we don't do anymore, or they don't have a staff person. And now they'll have the staff person to do it.
So this director, what he does is he's helped to focus the council on improving the economic status of all the community, and they have a number of initiatives aimed at that. So for example, they work on childcare. He's also very focused on the neighborhoods and trying to encourage more robust, dynamic neighborhood associations as a pathway of providing support. So I'm not
we do
married-
that. We do it another way with our
Yeah.
neighborhood. A different position works on that.
So I'm not married to having a workshop. Perhaps an alternative would just put this on a future agenda.
Well, I think
And-
that gets to your goals again, when you give me direction on goals. So when we talk about that one area of inclusive, remember a diverse, equitable and inclusive group, we have tasks, maybe that's where it gets in that discussion on what you'd like to see. And that gives a program of work that I could develop with a staff person, right?
So for the challenges,
But we don't, you match services doesn't, they might have one person doing all that. And I might argue we have two separate people, but it's getting done. You know what I mean? And like Deb and everybody else are working on, human services are working on childcare. So I don't know if this person would step into that too, that we have too many people working on it. But if that's a need, we should work on it. Don't get me wrong. How people attack problems and get things done are not always the same in different cities.
I think that Dubuque's efforts arose out of their work as a STAR community, and the STAR rankings, one of them has to do with that focus on community equity and neighborhoods. And so they've been working on this for, I don't know, more than a decade.
Yeah.
And it's part of their entire city process. So to me, it just feels like something that does require more than simply having staff meet with their director and then changing the job description. It's something that I think requires council to have that discussion about what our goals are and how we can meet those goals best. And it may mean more than just having a job description tweaked. That's my concern.
Well, I mean, this is why we do these city tours. We hope to go out and learn from other communities and learn things that are innovative. And I provided council with an opportunity to look at doing something differently. I appreciate their goal of trying to improve the economic status of all its citizens. I think that that is a legitimate goal of council. I've offered a path forwards for thinking about that. We could do that in a workshop. We could do it on an agenda item. But the challenge is we have a DEI position that has not been posted, and this seems like an opportunity to make adjustments so that we're attracting someone who would be able to take on those roles. So let's do this. I want to modify my motion.
Oh, maybe let me,
Good.
Oh, I was just going to ask the question, even separate from this, will council have an opportunity to look at that description?
I'll certainly provide for it. It's not usually something you get involved in.
Okay,
You give me the direction on what you want, and we have to,
Okay.
well, I rely on HR actually to come up with it's more like a legal document, but I'll be glad to share it with you. Tim always asks how other cities do it. This DEI, I mean, we've tried to rely on what other cities use as far as this job description. Because when you recruit, you use a certain terminology and professionals apply for it because they know that there's some continuity in the recruitment for the same position. So I'll be glad to share it with you.
So at the end of the day, I'm looking for something broader than just DEI. I think our city staff is of a size that I'm not sure it warrants a full-time position just on DEI. So I would like to see a broader mission. I think there are people who are struggling financially in our community that would benefit from someone who is able to focus our attention. And so I'm offering that as a suggestion. I'm going to just throw out a motion, and then if it dies, that's okay.
There's a motion on the
I'm
floor
going
right
to withdraw.
now.
I'm going to withdraw the motion.
Thank you.
And I'm going to move that we hold off on posting the DEI position, and that we place the subject of the job description of the DEI person on a future agenda for consideration of whether that role might be clarified in light of community outreach efforts.
I'll second.
Discussion?
So, go ahead, Anita.
Sorry, I was just going to say that usually a DEI position is also concerned about SES issues. And so I don't see these as two separate issues. I see that a DEI person, even with, I haven't seen the job description, but usually they are going to take on lower SES as part of their duties anyway.
Well,
but I'm happy to learn more.
My main concern is that this seems like something that is a staff duty. It's not a city council policy motion. And I worry that we're not staying in our lane by asking staff to recraft the job description without having broader discussions of our goals and other things so that staff can look at what those policies are that they are trying to implement in the job description.
I'm fighting too hard on this.
All right, so motion made, second, is there?
Mayor, I'm working too hard at this. I care deeply for all of our community, regardless of their economic status. I withdraw this motion.
And just to be clear, I think that all of council cares about those needs. I think it's more or less we're trying to delve into the policy aspect, staying in our lane. And I will share with you that I too was very impressed with the individual. And I think there's some things to be, taken away from it. I really appreciate Anita's comments that really, maybe I've been thinking too narrowly about the DEI. And the other thing is why can't, once a person's on board, be challenged to think broader in that regard too, versus being prescriptive at the front end. So motion's been withdrawn. Anything else, Tim?
No.
Gloria?
Anita and I had the opportunity, I think it's a couple of weeks ago now, to attend the Iowa Arts Summit. And we got some really, I think, exciting ideas for the way the arts can be used as a means of economic development. And I hope that we'll be able to share those ideas more broadly with council moving forward. Unfortunately, I haven't really had my mind on that the last couple of weeks. But it was a really good summit, and I think there were some excellent questions asked and solid presentations.
Well, I'll jump in and share, welcome back to all the students. Iowa State kicked off again, so lots of activity. So I'm glad they're there. And big weekend for the Ames School District. We got ribbon cutting at 11:30 on Saturday. And I think there's open house on, I think from noon until 4, I believe, tours. I was able to accompany my grandson yesterday and go through it. It's a very impressive facility. So congratulations to the Ames School District for completing that project, and what a great addition to our community. So with that, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.